Hello, cuties, and welcome back to another React. Now, last time we watched Star Wars together, we had Zero Eves with us, and she helped me a lot by explaining about really a lot of things. But what I really want to know and asked about was the colors of the lightsabers, besides other things, obviously. Now, today, we are going to be reacting to Vader Explains every lightsaber color meaning explained in detail to answer my question. Now, after that, I'm sure I would want my own lightsaber too. But as usual, we grab our coffee and we get right into it.
Every lightsaber color tells a story about the person swinging it. The crystal inside chooses its wielder, and the bond between them produces the blade's color. No two connections are the same. That's why there are 11 distinct colors across Star Wars canon and legends, each with a completely different meaning. Today, I'm breaking down every single one, starting with the one you think you already know. Blue.
No, I like purple. Purple is my favorite color, but we're gonna get into blue first.
Was the most boring lightsaber color. There, I said it. Everyone knows it, nobody thinks about it, and it gets completely overshadowed by flashier options like purple or the Darksaber. But here's the thing. Blue has more history than every other color combined, and most fans couldn't tell you a single interesting fact about it. Let me fix that. Blue debuted on May 25th, 1977 in A New Hope. That makes it the color that literally defined what a lightsaber looks like in the public imagination. Before blue, lightsabers didn't exist. After blue, they became the most iconic weapon in fiction. And that original blade, it wasn't CGI, it wasn't even a practical effect in the way you'd think. Artists hand drew the glow frame by frame using a technique called rotoscoping. Every flicker...
I know rotoscoping. I do rotoscope a lot. But that is crazy. 1977. Wow.
Every hum of light on that blade was animated by hand. A technical workaround that accidentally became one of the most recognizable visuals in movie history. In universe, blue represents the Jedi Guardian. These are the fighters. The ones who prioritize combat skill and physical mastery over diplomacy or sitting around debating Force philosophy. Obi-Wan Kenobi and Anakin Skywalker are the flagship users, and that's not a coincidence. Both are defined by action first, reflection second. The crystal itself forms through the natural Jedi attunement process. The Kyber crystal chooses its user, the bond forms, and the color emerges. No corruption, no ritual, no bleeding. Just pure harmony between a Jedi and the Force. And if you think blue is rare, it's the exact opposite. 538 compiled a dataset of 132 unique lightsabers across canon and legends, and blue dominates as the single most common blade color. It's the default, the baseline, the one every other color is measured against. But if blue is the foundation, the next color only exists because of a production problem nobody saw coming: green. Most fans think Luke Skywalker switched from a blue lightsaber to a green one because he grew as a character. He went from naive farm boy to confident Jedi Knight, so obviously the color change was symbolic, right? It's a beautiful theory, and it's completely wrong. Here's the thing. When Return of the Jedi was filming in 1983, the production team had a problem. The Sarlacc pit sequence takes place against the bright blue sky of Tatooine, and Luke's original blue blade was literally disappearing into the background. It looked terrible on camera, so they changed it to green. That's it. Not a metaphor.
Crazy lore, by the way. Crazy lore. What?
Not a character arc decision, just cinematography. But here's where it gets interesting. The accident actually works perfectly. In universe, green Kyber crystals are associated with Jedi consulars, the ones who lean into wisdom, diplomacy, and deep Force connection rather than pure combat skill. Think Yoda, think Qui-Gon Jinn. These are Jedi who walk with the Force more than they swing at it. They're philosophers first, fighters second. And if you look at Luke's journey, that's exactly where he ends up. In Return of the Jedi, he doesn't defeat the Emperor through combat, he throws his lightsaber away. He wins through compassion, through his connection to his father, through trusting the Force over his fighting ability. A green blade fits that.
Well, obviously, I cannot relate much to all of this because I'm still very new to Star Wars and I didn't watch it. But I'm trying to relate the colors of the lightsabers, like he's explaining, to what I'm gonna be watching as well in Star Wars.
That arc like it was planned from the start. It wasn't, but it should have been. That's what makes the green lightsaber so fascinating. A purely technical production decision accidentally created one of the most thematically perfect color assignments in the entire franchise. The living Force works in mysterious ways apparently, even behind the camera. Now, blue and green are your safe, classic Jedi colors. Every Padawan expects one of those two. But the next color on our list, nobody expects it, and nobody was supposed to have it. Red A red lightsaber
Oh,
is
it's
an
the
act
other
of
way
violence
too.
before it's ever swung at anyone. Most people think Sith just find red crystals or build them. They don't. They torture them into existence. The canonical
Oh,
process is called bleeding. A Sith takes a Kyber crystal, a living, force-attuned crystal that can think and feel and resist, and they pour every ounce of hatred, pain, and dark side rage into it until the crystal cracks under the pressure and turns crimson. That's not a metaphor. The crystal
wow.
literally suffers, it fights back, and if it resists hard enough, it can self-destruct and injure the person trying to corrupt it. Bleeding a Kyber crystal
Wow.
isn't craftsmanship, it's domination. Here's where it gets interesting for the lore nerds. This explanation is relatively new. If you grew up reading the old expanded universe material, you were told that Sith used synthetic crystals to produce red blades. Manufactured in a furnace, powered by the dark side, completely artificial. That was the accepted lore for years. But when Disney restructured the canon, that explanation got thrown out. Modern Star Wars says,
I'm really sure a lot of you are angry about that. So the Disney restructuring of stuff, but let's keep going.
Sith don't manufacture anything. They take something pure and break it. The bleeding mechanic replaced synthetic crystals entirely, and honestly, it's a way darker and more fitting origin story for the villains who use them. Now, from a
It really
production
does,
standpoint, Darth Vader's red blade appeared on screen the exact same day as the original blue one, May 25th, 1977. The color contrast between hero and villain was immediate and completely intentional.
Yeah.
Red meant danger, red meant enemy. That visual shorthand has never changed. But here's the detail that makes red even more fascinating. Bleeding isn't permanent. A bled crystal can be purified, healed back from corruption. And when that happens, it doesn't return to its original color. It turns white, which means every red lightsaber is technically one act of compassion away from becoming something entirely different. And that process of purification, it created one of the rarest and most meaningful blade colors in all of Star Wars, purple. One of the most iconic lightsaber colors in the entire franchise exists because Samuel L. Jackson wanted to find himself in a crowd. That's it. That's the origin story. No ancient Jedi prophecy, no deep Force lore. An actor watched the massive Battle of Geonosis sequence being filmed for Attack of the Clones back in 2002 and realized he'd never be able to spot himself among hundreds of Jedi all swinging blue and green blades. So he went to George Lucas and asked for a purple one. Lucas said yes. And just like that, one of the rarest lightsaber colors in Star Wars history was born from pure vanity. And honestly, it's the most Samuel L. Jackson thing that has ever happened. But the prop team took it even further. Jackson's lightsaber hilt was engraved with the letters BMF, a direct reference to his character's wallet in Pulp Fiction. Jackson himself has confirmed this in interviews. So, yes, Mace Windu, one of the most powerful Jedi to ever sit on the council, was walking around the Jedi Temple carrying a weapon with a Pulp Fiction Easter egg on it. Nobody in universe ever noticed. Probably for the best, but here's where it gets genuinely interesting. Because even though purple started as a behind-the-scenes request, the in-universe explanation they built around it actually makes Mace Windu a far more compelling character. Purple sits between blue and red on the color spectrum, light side and dark side, and that's exactly where Windu operates. He's the only Jedi who mastered Vapad, a lightsaber combat form so dangerous it was essentially forbidden. Vapad works by channeling the opponent's own darkness and aggression back at them. To use it, you have to touch the dark side without falling to it. Every single fight, Windu walks that razor edge between Jedi discipline and Sith fury. The purple blade reflects that. It's not blue because Windu isn't a standard guardian. It's not red because he hasn't fallen. It's something in between. Moral complexity given a color. And the fact that Mace Windu is essentially the only prominent canonical user of a purple lightsaber makes it feel exclusive
Yeah, let me move myself, you guys, for you so you can see him.
Rather than arbitrary. Purple doesn't belong to a class of Jedi or a philosophy. It belongs to one man. One incredibly specific, incredibly dangerous man who asked the dark side to dance and never let it lead. Not bad for a color that only exists because an actor couldn't find himself on screen. But if you think purple's backstory is unusual, wait until you hear about the blade color that was hiding in plain sight for decades before anyone understood what it actually meant. Yellow.
Yellow?
Here's what's weird about yellow. It's
side,
historically the least glamorous lightsaber color in the entire Jedi Order. No legendary duels. No famous wielders that casual fans would recognize. Yellow was the color of Jedi Temple guards, the masked enforcers who stood silently at doorways, and Jedi sentinels, the operatives who worked in the shadows. And somehow, this is the color that closes out the entire Skywalker saga. Let me explain why that matters. In Legends material, yellow represented something very specific: balance. not the raw combat focus of a guardian with their blue blade, not the scholarly wisdom of a consular with green. Sentinels blended both disciplines and applied them practically. They were the intelligence operatives, the security specialists, the Jedi who could slice a computer terminal and then slice through a Sith assassin 5 minutes later. Useful? Absolutely. Flashy? Not even close. Temple guards took it even further. They weren't individuals. They surrendered their personal identities, wore identical masks, and carried double-bladed yellow sabers as symbols of institutional authority. Yellow meant duty, vigilance, service without glory.
Wow.
But here's where it gets interesting. In 2019, the final shot of The Rise of Skywalker shows Rey igniting a brand new lightsaber, and it's yellow. Not the Skywalker blue she'd been carrying, not green, not some dramatic new color nobody had seen before. Yellow, the Sentinel's color, the Guard's color, the color of someone who watches, protects, and walks their own path. And the detail that makes this choice land is the construction. Rey's lightsaber isn't inherited from a fallen master. It's not pulled from a cave or handed down through generations. She built it from her staff, the weapon she'd been carrying since we first saw her on Jakku. That staff was a scavenger's tool, a survivor's weapon. She literally transformed her old life into something new. The symbolism is hard to miss. Rey isn't declaring herself a guardian or a consular. She's forging a new identity entirely. Watchful, balanced, independent.
Wait, so the double-sided blade started with the yellow, or was it also like for other sabers before? Please let me know.
Sentinel in spirit, if not in title. The yellow blade tells you everything about where the Jedi go from here, forward, on their own terms. It's a quiet, deeply personal choice for a color that spent decades being overlooked. But if yellow represents the future of the Jedi, then the next color on our list represents something far stranger. A blade that technically shouldn't exist at all. Orange. Dave Filoni stood on stage at Star Wars Celebration 2023 and said 5 words that sent the entire fandom into detective mode. Nothing is accidental. He was talking about the orange lightsabers in the Ahsoka series, and that single quote confirmed what fans had been speculating about for months. The orange blade isn't just a cool color, it's a message. Baylan Skoll and Shin Hati both wield orange, or more precisely reddish-orange blades in the Ahsoka series. And the moment those sabers ignited on screen, people noticed. Because orange isn't red, it's not yellow. It sits in this uncomfortable visual space right between the two. And that's exactly the point. Here's where it gets interesting. Red represents the dark side. Yellow has historically been tied to Jedi Sentinels and Temple Guards, characters defined by balance and vigilance. Orange lives in the gap between those two extremes, which makes it the perfect blade for characters who refuse to fit into neat categories. Baylan Skoll isn't a Sith. He's a former Jedi who walked away from the Order, carrying its teachings but rejecting its structure.
Yeah, I was about to ask then, who are these people that actually carry this? Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, actually.
Shin Hati is his apprentice, trained outside the system entirely. Neither of them are what they first appear to be, and Filoni literally told us that with the color of their weapons. But here's the thing. Orange didn't start in live action. Before Ahsoka, the most famous orange blade belonged to Cal Kestis in Star Wars Jedi: Fallen Order. The game launched in 2019, and orange was one of the selectable crystal colors players could choose. It was a fan favorite almost immediately, so when orange showed up in live action 4 years later, it felt like a graduation. A color that millions of players had already bonded with in a game was suddenly being used by a showrunner to tell a very specific story about moral ambiguity, and Filoni wasn't subtle about it. Nothing is accidental isn't a throwaway comment. That's a direct invitation to read into every creative decision he makes. The orange blade doesn't give you answers. It makes you ask questions. Is this character falling toward the dark side? Are they climbing back toward the light? Or are they something else entirely? Something the Jedi and Sith binary was never built to explain. Some Legends material tied orange to ancient Jedi traditions, but honestly, the modern significance of this color comes entirely from Filoni's intentional use. He took a color that most fans only knew from a video game and turned it into one of the most loaded visual symbols in recent Star Wars storytelling. Orange is the lightsaber color that doesn't tell you what someone is. It tells you that you don't know yet. And if you think that level of ambiguity is unsettling, wait until you see what happens when a lightsaber has no color allegiance at all. White. Here's the thing about white lightsabers that makes them unlike every other color on this list. You can't make one from scratch. A white blade can only exist if a red one existed first. Let that sink in, because it's one of the most poetic pieces.
Okay, let's rewatch this, you guys, because that is
exist if a red one existed first.
Look at this. You gotta see this thing sink behind me. I can't even speak anymore. art, literal art.
Sink in, because it's one of the most poetic pieces of lore in the entire Star Wars universe. White lightsabers are created through a process called purification. You take a kyber crystal that has been bled, forced to turn red through dark side corruption, and you heal it, you cleanse it. You pour compassion into a crystal that only knows pain, and it comes back white. Not blue, not green, not its original color. White, like a scar that became something beautiful. The process mirrors bleeding in reverse with terrifying symmetry. Bleeding requires hatred, domination, forcing your will onto the crystal until it breaks. Purification requires the exact opposite. You have to let go. You have to open yourself completely to the crystal's suffering and meet it with empathy instead of control. Same crystal. Same force connection, completely opposite emotional states, producing completely opposite results. The most famous white blade wielder in all of canon is Ahsoka Tano, and her story is exactly why these blades hit so hard. Ahsoka left the Jedi Order, she's not a Jedi anymore, but she's also not a Sith. She exists in the space between, independent of both, loyal to neither institution, and her white blades are the literal visual proof of that independence. She obtained her crystals by taking them from a fallen Inquisitor whose crystals had been bled red. Then she purified them. The purification is depicted in Tales of the Jedi, and it's one of the most quietly powerful moments in Star Wars animation. No epic duel, no explosion, just Ahsoka, the crystals, and the Force doing what it does when someone chooses healing over destruction. White is neutrality. White is independence. White is what happens when someone takes the worst thing the dark side can do to a kyber crystal and answers it with grace instead of vengeance. Every other color on this list can be created through bonding, attunement, or corruption. White is the only one that requires darkness to have come first. It's a color born from trauma and recovery, and that's why it resonates so deeply with fans who love Ahsoka's arc. She didn't just survive leaving the Jedi, she became something entirely new. But if white represents walking away from both orders entirely, there's one weapon that represents something even more ancient and politically dangerous. And it's the only one of its kind.
Let me go back.
But if white represents walking away from both orders entirely, there's one weapon that represents something even more ancient and politically dangerous. And it's the only one of its kind ever made. The Darksaber.
Okay.
Every lightsaber on this list is a weapon. This one is a throne. The Darksaber isn't just another color variant. It's a singular artifact. There is only one in the entire galaxy, and whoever holds it has a legitimate claim to rule all of Mandalore. No other lightsaber in Star Wars history carries that kind of political weight. This isn't a blade you swing in a duel and—
Let's see. Luke Skywalker, Darth Vader, Obi-Wan Kenobi, Luke Skywalker. Oh, okay. And this is the double-sided one.
Walk away from. This is a blade that starts wars. Let me explain. The Darksaber was created by Tara Vizsla, the first Mandalorian ever inducted into the Jedi Order. That alone makes it historically significant.
A Nokia fossil from... And guess what, you guys? You can still call. You can still make calls on this phone. Trust me.
But here's where it gets complicated. When Tare Vizsla died, the Mandalorians raided the Jedi Temple and stole it back. From that moment on, the Darksaber stopped being a Jedi weapon and became the symbol of Mandalorian leadership. Winning it in combat is how power transfers. Not elections, not bloodlines, combat. You beat the wielder, you take the saber, you rule Mandalore. That's the tradition. And the weapon itself is unlike anything else in Star Wars. It has a flat black blade with a white energy outline. Almost like a negative image of a normal lightsaber, it's shorter than a standard saber, and the sound is completely different. Instead of the classic hum, the Darksaber produces a high-pitched, screeching whine that immediately tells you this thing is ancient and dangerous. But here's the detail that most people miss. The Darksaber doesn't just cut through things, it responds to the wield.
Oh my goodness, you guys, I can't help but comment about, like, is it real or is it cake? Is it real or is it cake? Oh my goodness, this guy.
There's emotional state. The more you resist it, the heavier it becomes. Literally heavier.
I would love to see the
struggles with it throughout The Mandalorian because he's fighting the blade instead of flowing with it. He's muscling through every swing, and the Darksaber punishes him for it. It's one of the only weapons in Star Wars that actively fights back against its own user. And speaking of The Mandalorian, the Darksaber's live-action debut is one of the most jaw-dropping reveals in recent Star Wars history. Season 1 finale, 2019. Moff Gideon crashes his TIE fighter, everyone thinks he's done, and then he cuts his way out of the wreckage wielding the Darksaber. Nobody saw it coming. The entire fanbase collectively lost its mind because the implications were massive. If Gideon has the Darksaber, that means he took it from someone. which means there's a chain of combat victories stretching back through Mandalorian history, and a former Imperial officer now sits at the end of it. That's what makes this weapon so terrifying. It's not the blade itself, it's what the blade represents. Every other lightsaber on this list says something about its wielder's connection to the Force. The Darksaber says something about politics, power, and who gets to rule an entire civilization. It's the only lightsaber that functions as a crown. And if you think a weapon that doubles as a political crisis is intense, wait until we get into a set of colors that most fans have never even seen in a movie theater. Cyan. Here's something most people don't think about. Cyan exists because of you. Not you in some abstract philosophical sense. You, the player, sitting at a customization screen, scrolling through lightsaber colors, and deciding that standard blue wasn't cutting it anymore. Cyan is that bright, electric blue-green that sits right between blue and teal. Visually, it's immediately distinct from a standard blue blade. Brighter, more electric, almost neon. And if you've ever seen it in action, you know it pops off the screen in a way that regular blue simply doesn't. But here's the thing. Cyan didn't come from a movie. It didn't come from a TV show. It came from video games. Cal Kestis in Star Wars Jedi. Fallen Order is probably the most recognized Cyan wielder in modern canon. Before him, Mitra Surik rocked a Cyan blade in Knights of the Old Republic Tuvok and Legends. Both characters share something important in common. Neither of them operated inside the traditional Jedi Order structure. Cal was a survivor hiding from the Empire. Mitra was an exile cut off from the Force itself. These aren't characters who fit neatly into the Guardian or console boxes that blue and green represent. They're individuals forging their own path, and their blade color reflects exactly that. And that's not an accident. In universe, Cyan doesn't carry a rigid classification. There's no Cyan means you're a diplomat who also punches people rule. It's personal. The color reflects an individual attunement to the Force rather than an institutional role, which makes perfect sense when you consider where it came from. Video games are inherently about personal choice. You pick your appearance, your fighting style, your moral alignment. So when games like Fallen Order and KOTOR 2 started offering colors beyond the classic blue-green-red trio, they weren't just adding cosmetic options, they were fundamentally shifting how Star Wars storytelling works. The game-era palette Cyan included alongside Indigo and Magenta
I should definitely play one of these games, guys. 100%. Also, it's very interesting how many colors came from nothing. Like, there is not real lore behind it. There is just a person that wanted it and, you know, a game that wanted it. Customizations and VFX and animation. Wow.
Represents a move away from institutional meaning and toward personal meaning. The Jedi Order says blue means guardian. The Force itself says Cyan means whatever your connection to it actually is. That's a massive philosophical shift hiding inside a color selection menu. And here's why that matters beyond just games. These colors started bleeding into broader canon. Once millions of players built an emotional connection to their cyan-bladed Cal Kestis, that color stopped being just a game thing. It became part of the visual language of Star Wars. Cyan now carries weight because players gave it weight. Every time someone chose it over standard blue, they were saying, I want something that feels like mine. For casual viewers who might not know any of this lore, Cyan still works on a purely visual level. It's brighter and more electric than blue, and the human eye picks up on that difference instantly. You see a Cyan blade and your brain registers that's not the same. It feels newer. It feels different, which is exactly what it is. But if Cyan represents the personal side of the Force, the next color takes that individuality even deeper into territory most fans have never even heard of. Indigo. What color would a Jedi in Crisis carry? Not a Jedi who's fallen, not a Jedi who's turned, a Jedi who's still figuring it out. That's Indigo. Indigo sits in a visual space most people overlook. It's deeper than blue, cooler than purple, and darker than both. On screen, it reads like a bruised version of a standard blue blade, heavier, more troubled. And that visual weight isn't an accident, because Indigo represents something the classic lightsaber colors don't really touch: unresolved internal conflict. Here's the thing. Blue signals clarity. A blue blade says, I know who I am, I know what I'm fighting for, and I'm ready. Purple signals moral complexity, but worn with confidence. Mace Windu didn't struggle with his proximity to the dark side. He mastered it. Purple is the color of someone who's walked the line and come out stronger. Indigo is neither of those things. Indigo is the color of someone still walking that line, still mid-journey, still asking questions they don't have answers to yet. And that's what makes it one of the most emotionally honest lightsaber colors in the entire palette. Like Cyan, Indigo is primarily a game-era color. It appears in the Star Wars Jedi series as a selectable blade option, giving players the ability to project a specific emotional identity onto their version of Cal
Very
Kestis.
beautiful,
Its
actually.
canonical footprint is smaller than the classic colors. You won't find it in the films or the animated series, but its symbolic resonance is arguably richer than colors with 10 times the screen time. Players gravitate toward it for a very specific reason. If you pick blue, you're playing the hero.
meme.
If you pick red, you're playing the villain. If you pick indigo, you're playing someone who doesn't know what they are yet. That's a far more interesting character state than
That's
certainty in either
very
direction.
interesting,
The
yeah.
visual darkness matters here too. Standard blue is bright,
that would be me.
optimistic, clean. Indigo absorbs light, it feels heavier on screen, more burdened. Players who choose it aren't looking for a heroic glow. They want their character to feel conflicted, and the color delivers that without a single line of dialogue. This is
Yeah.
part of a larger trend worth paying attention to. As the Star Wars universe expands, the color palette expands with it. The original trilogy gave us 3 colors. The prequels added 1. Now, through games and expanded media, we're filling in the emotional gaps between established archetypes. And indigo fills the space between blue and purple, that
Lego.
narrow band where conviction starts to blur into doubt. It's not a color for Jedi Masters or Sith Lords, it's a color for characters in the middle of their story. And that's exactly why it resonates. But if indigo is the color of doubt, the last color on our list takes things in the complete opposite direction.
Ooh,
Magenta.
some more.
A
Magenta.
pink lightsaber in Star Wars. Let that sit for a second. Magenta is the most visually unexpected color in the entire lightsaber spectrum.
I did
a
not know there
pinkish
was
purple hue
pink.
that looks like it wandered in from a completely different franchise. It appears in the Star Wars Jedi series, and the first time you see it as a selectable option, your brain genuinely does a double take. This isn't blue. This isn't red. This isn't even close to anything the original trilogy prepared you for, and that's exactly the point. Like Cyan and Indigo, Magenta is primarily a game era color, but where Cyan feels electric and sharp, and Indigo feels heavy and introspective, Magenta feels defiant. It's the color that says, I refuse to be categorized by your system.
I do really like how they keep adding things and how there is a story behind a color, you know? It is very, very interesting.
It doesn't fit neatly into the Guardian Consular Sentinel framework. It doesn't map onto light side or dark side. It just exists, unapologetically as something personal. And here's the thing about Magenta's rarity in canon. It makes the color feel genuinely yours. This isn't a blade you inherit from a master. It's not a color tied to an institution or a rank. When a kyber crystal bonds with someone and produces magenta, it's reflecting something very specific about who that person is. Something the Force itself recognizes as distinct. But zoom out from magenta for a second, because taken together, cyan, indigo, and magenta represent something bigger. They're the game generation's contribution to Star Wars lore, a palette of personal identity that sits alongside the institutional colors of the Jedi and Sith. The Force doesn't just produce guardians and consulars anymore, it produces individuals. And that brings us to the full picture, 11 colors. Think about how far this system has come. The original trilogy gave us 2 colors, blue and red, a clean moral binary, good versus evil. Then the prequels expanded it with green for wisdom and yellow for sentinels. Samuel L. Jackson kicked the door open with purple. The animated series introduced white through purification and brought the ancient political weight of the Darksaber into play. Orange crept in through games and then walked into live action with deliberate intent. And now cyan, indigo, and magenta have stretched the palette even further, proving that the Force is as varied as the people who wield it. Every single one of these colors tells you something. Blue says I protect. Green says I understand. Red says I dominate. Purple says I walk the line. Yellow says I watch. White says I healed. The Darksaber says I lead. Orange says I'm not what you expect. And the game era colors say I'm me. That's the real story of lightsaber colors, not just a visual gimmick or a toy marketing decision. It's a system that grew from a simple binary into a full spectrum of identity. And every time a new color appears, it's Star Wars saying the same thing it's always said at its best. The Force belongs to everyone.
Wow, wow, wow. And I think that was it for today's video, you guys. This was extremely interesting for me to watch. And I really hope you guys enjoyed it and learned something with me today, because I learned a lot about these lightsabers. And I'm no longer a purple. I am an indigo lightsaber person. And I would really want to have one. I would really like to have one. And it's crazy how these colors came to be, honestly. And if you guys want me to watch more of these Star Wars content, then leave it in the comment section below. And if you want to keep up with me, then definitely check me out on Twitch. The link will be in the description below. And for now, goodbye.